The Seattle evening sun spilled across the stacked glass towers of downtown, making every window gleam like a giant diamond. A glossy black Bentley rolled to a stop right in front of Northbridge Labs headquarters, one of the most powerful tech companies on the West Coast. The car door swung open. Brooke Hastings, CEO of Northbridge Labs, paced in front of the hood, gripping her phone so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Her gray suit fluttered lightly in the wind, but her mind was anything but calm. Surrounding Brooke was the company's finest team of engineers. They had stayed awake for nights on end, drinking coffee until dawn, yet none of them could break the piece of code blocking their newest product. "Just one line of code," Brooke muttered, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "One line that could make us miss a global deadline." She had built Northbridge Labs from nothing after losing both her father and her husband in the same plane crash 5 years ago. Since then, she had raised her young son, Brady, on her own and fought to prove that a woman could absolutely stand at the very top of America's technology landscape. But today, she felt like she was standing on the edge of failure. Investors were waiting. The press was hovering. Hundreds of employees were counting on her. And she was stuck with a bug that even the engineers from MIT couldn't solve. Then a voice rose from behind her. Deep, slightly rough, but steady. "I can help you fix it." Brooke turned immediately, and she froze. The man standing before her was tall, white, and somewhere in his early 40s. He wore the building's Navy janitor uniform, his name, Grant, stitched above the chest pocket. His beard was neatly trimmed, but a bit thick, and his eyes were sharp, intelligent in a way very few people in his line of work possessed. Grant still held a mop in his hand, but his eyes were fixed on the laptop screen that one of the engineers was holding. Security moved in right away. "Ma'am, he's just a janitor. Would you like us to—" "No." Brooke raised her hand to stop them. She looked straight at Grant. There was something about him. A calmness, a quiet confidence. "What did you just say?" "I said, I can help you translate that code," Grant repeated, his voice neither loud nor soft, just clear enough for everyone to hear. "I've watched your engineers work on it for 3 days while I mopped their floors. They're looking in the wrong direction." One engineer standing beside Brooke let out a small, condescending laugh. "Ma'am, he's a janitor." The entire back-end team, Stanford and MIT graduates, gave up on this. "I don't think someone who—" "Give him the laptop," Brooke cut in sharply. Silence snapped across the courtyard. The engineers stared at one another, unable to believe what they had just heard. "Mrs. Hastings, are you sure?" "I said, give it to him. Right now." The young engineer swallowed hard, then handed over the MacBook Pro, his hands trembling slightly. Grant set the mop aside, wiped his hands on his uniform pants, and sat down right on the concrete steps of the building. "I need access to the system," he said. "Give him guest access," Brooke ordered. An engineer reluctantly typed in the password. And then Grant began. In that moment, the world around him seemed to disappear. No more whispers from doubtful engineers. No more watchful eyes from security. No more billionaire woman standing right behind him. There was only code. His fingers flew across the keyboard at an almost unreal speed, as if remembering a piece of music only he knew. Green characters reflected in his deep-set eyes. He opened the terminal, ran a few diagnostic commands, then scanned hundreds of lines of code at a pace that stunned everyone watching. "What is he doing?" one engineer whispered. "He's tracing the call stack. But this style of tracing, I've never seen anyone do it like that." 5 minutes passed, then 10. A bead of sweat rolled down Grant's forehead, but his hands didn't pause. Brooke folded her arms, unblinking. At moments, her heart pounded so hard she feared people might hear it. Was this a mistake? She had just given a janitor access to Northbridge Labs' system. If the board of directors found out. But the way he worked, focused, fluent, exact, was nothing like an amateur. Then Grant stopped. He studied the screen for a few more seconds, typed the final sequence of commands, and hit Enter. Lines of green text scrolled by. And then, all the warnings vanished. A green checkmark appeared. Build successful. It's done, Grant said quietly, sliding the laptop back to Brooke. You used a nested loop inside an async function. It created a race condition and fed corrupted data into the output stream. I refactored everything into a promise-based architecture with proper error handling. You can test it now. The air seemed to freeze. Brooke grabbed the laptop. Her hands trembled as she ran the test suite. Once, twice, 3 times. Every single test passed. The product was fully functional. A long breath escaped her chest, so light it felt as if the entire world had lifted off her shoulders. But right after that, shock surged even stronger. Who are you? Grant stood up and picked up his mop again. He dusted the uniform lightly, almost as if trying to blur out the truth. I'm Grant Marlowe, he said, calm but heavy. I've been a janitor here for 2 months. Night shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. No, Brooke shook her head. I mean, where did you learn to code? Who did you work for before this? Grant stayed silent for a few seconds. His gaze dropped to the cold concrete beneath him. I used to be a lead software engineer at a startup in San Francisco, he said slowly. We worked on AI and machine learning. I led a team of 15 people. We pitched to Google and Amazon. The engineers around them gaped. Then why are you... Brooke hesitated, searching for the right words. Why are you doing this job? Grant looked up. His eyes met hers, deep, raw, and full of broken pieces. Because 5 years ago, Grant said, voice tightening, I lost everything. If you're following this story and want to continue the unexpected journey of Brooke and Grant, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. So, what exactly happened 5 years ago? And was it powerful enough to collapse the entire life of a tech genius like Grant Marlowe? What do you think took everything from him? Brooke stood still, feeling as if time around them had just frozen. The engineers, the security guards, everyone fell silent, leaving only Grant's voice echoing steadily across the courtyard in front of the building, like a confession that had been suppressed for far too long. I used to have a family, Grant said, his voice trembling slightly. A wonderful wife named Heather. She was a preschool teacher, the kindest woman I've ever known. And 2 twin boys, Evan and Liam, 5 years old. They looked so alike that even I mixed them up sometimes. A fragile smile flickered on his lips, as though a beautiful memory had brushed past, but it disappeared just as quickly. Every night I came home, I was greeted by laughter, by hugs that nearly squeezed the breath out of me. Evan loved dinosaurs. Liam loved robots. They argued constantly about which one was cooler. Heather cooked in the kitchen, and I sat at the table helping the boys with their homework. He took a deep breath. It was a perfect life. Grant's fingers tightened until they turned white. Brooke stood close enough to notice the small motion. And then came one Saturday afternoon. The weather was beautiful. We went to an amusement park, something the boys had looked forward to for an entire month. Evan insisted on riding the roller coaster. Liam was scared, but he didn't want to lose to his brother. We had an amazing day. Grant paused to catch his breath, eyes reddening. On the way back, we stopped for ice cream. The boys were laughing loudly in the back seat. Heather held my hand and told me she loved me. I told her I loved her too. He swallowed hard, struggling to steady his voice. And then I saw headlights, swerving straight into our lane. I didn't have time to react. A big truck, the driver drunk, rammed directly into the side where the boys were sitting. No one dared to breathe. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, head trauma, broken ribs, and a broken arm. But I was alive. He wiped away a tear. They told me. Heather died at the scene. Evan and Liam were taken into emergency surgery, but didn't make it. I lost all three. In an instant. Brooke felt her own tears spill, but she didn't wipe them away. She just looked at the man in front of her, carrying a pain so vast it seemed impossible, yet still standing. After the funeral, Grant said softly, I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't return to a house that used to overflow with laughter. The boys' toys, Heather's clothes, the photos. I couldn't breathe. I started drinking, a lot. I stopped answering calls. The company fired me. I lost the house, lost everything. His voice tightened again. I thought, if I didn't die in that crash, maybe I should finish the job myself. Brooke instinctively stepped closer, as if pulled toward him by the weight of every word. But you didn't, she said. Grant shook his head. No, because one night, when I was sitting under a bridge with a bottle of whiskey in my hand, thinking about ending everything, an old man walked by. He gave me a sandwich and said, if you're still breathing, then you still have a reason to live. He let out a soft, sad laugh. I didn't believe him, but I didn't jump either. And the next morning, I decided, if I had to live, I would choose something simple. No pressure, no responsibility, just existing. I applied for a janitor job, night shift. No talking required. Nobody paid attention to me. I could hide. No one asked who I was. Brooke gently wiped her tears. But you still remembered how to code, she said. Grant nodded. Yes, it was the only thing I couldn't leave behind. Sometimes when I mopped the engineer's floor at night, I'd see the code on their screens, and my brain automatically debugged it. It was like a reflex. These past 3 days, I watched your team struggle. I wanted to speak up, but who would listen to a janitor? He looked at Brooke. Today, seeing you out here looking desperate, I thought maybe I should try. Brooke stepped closer, her voice low and sincere. Grant, I'm so sorry. I truly understand that pain. Grant frowned slightly. You, too? I lost my father and my husband on the same day, Brooke said, her voice cracking. A plane crash, 5 years ago. Brady was only 3 months old. They were flying out to visit us. The plane crashed right after takeoff. Grant's eyes widened. I wanted to die, Brooke continued, but I had Brady, so I had to live. I had to stand back up, but inside, she placed a hand on her chest. I was shattered. Their eyes met. Two souls that had once broken apart, recognizing each other in silence. That pain, Brooke whispered. I understand. Grant nodded. This time, he hid nothing. A quiet moment passed. Then Brooke took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and squared her shoulders as if a CEO switch had flicked back on. Grant, you just saved my company, she said firmly. You saved a project my team has spent 2 years building. I owe you. You don't owe me anything. Grant shook his head. I just helped. No, Brooke insisted. You shouldn't be a janitor. You have talent the world needs. Talent my company needs. Grant shook his head harder. You don't understand. I can't go back to that world. I can't. Then let me help you, Brooke cut in. Just like you helped me. Let me help you find the person you used to be. Why? Grant asked, full of doubt. Why do you care? Because, Brooke said slowly, when I hit rock bottom, no one helped me. I had to pull myself up alone. And I made a promise that one day, if I became strong enough, I would make sure someone else wouldn't have to go through that. Alone. Grant froze, unsure how to respond. You are not going to be a janitor anymore, Brooke declared. Starting today, you are a senior software engineer at Northbridge Labs, with a salary that matches your ability. If you need time to get back into it, I'll give it to you. You can't, Grant began quickly. I'm the CEO. Brooke smiled, warm and sharp all at once. I can do whatever I want. She turned to her assistant. Prepare the contract and set up an office for Mr. Marlowe. Then she looked back at Grant from head to toe. But first, Brooke tilted her head with a faint smirk. We need to get you some proper suits. A senior engineer at Northbridge Labs cannot be wearing a janitor uniform. Grant couldn't sleep that night. He lay on the old bed in his small rented apartment near the company, a bare room with nothing but a bed, an old wooden table, and a crooked wardrobe. No TV, no wall art, nothing that could remind him of the life he once had. For the past 5 years, he had trained himself to live as simply as possible, to the point of numbness. No memories, no hopes, only silence, and sometimes a terrifying emptiness. But tonight, his mind wouldn't stop spinning. Brooke Hastings had just changed his life. A senior engineer position, a salary he hadn't seen in 5 years, a chance to return to the world he once loved with everything he had. But did he deserve it? Grant lay still, eyes fixed on the ceiling, letting memories of Heather and the boys crash over him like a wave no one could stop. Evan with his mischievous grin. Liam, shy and always hiding behind his legs, and Heather, the woman whose laughter was bright enough to replace the sun. I'm sorry, he whispered into the darkness. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I'm still alive. Tears slid quietly down his temples. Grant didn't wipe them away. Tears had become a part of his life for the past 5 years. Sometimes he even wondered how he still had any left. Near dawn, Grant finally drifted off from exhaustion. But his sleep was filled with nightmares. The boys screaming, metal twisting, then that horrible silence like a bottomless pit swallowing everything. Grant jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Morning light was already filling the room. He glanced at the clock. 8 a.m. Brooke had told him to be at the office by 10. He dragged himself into the bathroom and stood before the mirror. The man staring back looked far older than his age. He was only 42, yet the reflection looked closer to 50. Strands of gray hair, deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth, marks left by years of pain that never healed. He shaved, washed his face, and tried to make himself look a little less worn. Then he opened the wardrobe, his janitor uniform folded neatly, a few old t-shirts, a pair of faded jeans, no suit, no tie. His phone vibrated. A message from Brooke. The driver will pick you up at 9. We'll get clothes first. Don't worry about anything. B. Grant stared at the screen. It had been so long since anyone cared what he wore or invited him to go shopping. The feeling was almost foreign. At exactly 9, a knock sounded at the door. A driver in a sharp black suit stood outside. Mr. Marlowe? I'm James, Mrs. Hastings's driver. She's waiting for you downstairs. Grant followed him down the stairs, and there it was again, the familiar black Bentley. Brooke sat in the back seat, wearing an elegant gray suit, reading something on her iPad. When she saw Grant, she looked up and smiled. Good morning. Did you sleep well? Grant slid into the seat. Well enough, he answered, a fragile little lie. Brooke studied him, her brows lifting slightly. You look a bit tired. I'm fine. She said nothing more, but her eyes made it clear she didn't believe him at all. James started the engine. We're heading to Nordstrom at Bellevue Square, Brooke explained. They have an excellent personal shopper. We'll get you a few suits, shirts, shoes, everything you need for your new role. You don't have to. Grant, she cut him off, her tone gentle but firm. Let me do this, okay? Grant could only nod. He didn't know how to argue with that. At Nordstrom, a personal shopper named Patricia greeted them. Professional posture, sharp eyes, the look of someone who transformed people for a living. She observed Grant for a few seconds and then nodded, as if she'd already envisioned a completely new version of him. We need a full transformation, Brooke said. Suits, shirts, trousers, shoes, everything suitable for a senior engineer. Patricia got to work immediately. 2 hours later, Grant stood in front of the mirror in the fitting room, stunned by his own reflection. A navy suit tailored perfectly to his frame, a crisp white shirt, a light blue silk tie, polished black Oxford shoes. His hair was trimmed neatly into a clean, modern style. The lighting fell on him in a way that made him look like someone else, someone confident, someone successful, someone important. But inside, he still felt like an imposter. Brooke stepped in, her smile bright. "You look incredible," she said. "Truly, this is the real Grant Marlowe." Grant met her gaze in the mirror. "But this isn't me," he said softly. "I'm just a janitor." Brooke shook her head and stepped closer. "No, you're a talented software engineer, a man who has endured a devastating tragedy. But tragedy doesn't define you. Your talent does." She stopped right in front of him, her voice steady but warm. "Today, you're going to walk into Northbridge Labs as a senior engineer, and I'll be there, right behind you. Okay?" Grant looked into her blue eyes, strong, gentle, unwavering. And in that moment, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. "Okay," he whispered. When Grant and Brooke stepped into the Northbridge Labs building at 11 a.m., everything felt foreign compared to the world Grant had grown used to. Normally, he arrived at 10 p.m., when the office was quiet, when only the hum of the air conditioning filled the empty hallways. He emptied trash bins, mopped floors, arranged chairs, tasks so repetitive he no longer needed to think. But this morning was different. The building felt alive. Employees hurried back and forth, chatting, laughing, exchanging ideas. Sunlight poured through massive glass panels and reflected off the polished stone floors. The air pulsed with creative energy, the kind Grant had walked away from for years. He froze mid-step, overwhelmed by how big, how bright, how loud everything felt. "You okay?" Brooke asked softly. "Just a lot of people," Grant admitted, his voice barely steady. "You'll get used to it," she said, with a small, reassuring smile. "Take it slow." They entered the elevator. A few employees recognized Grant, the familiar night shift janitor, but now he appeared in a crisp suit, posture sharp and composed. They glanced at one another, whispering, confused. No one dared ask. When the elevator opened on the 12th floor, the R&D division, the heart of Northbridge Labs, Brooke led Grant into a large conference room. Around 20 engineers sat inside. As the door opened, all heads lifted. Some eyes are curious, some doubtful, and one pair openly displeased, belonging to Curtis Bell, senior systems engineer. Brooke stood tall, her voice clear and confident. "Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce Grant Marlowe. I'm sure many of you recognize him." Murmurs rippled through the room. "He's the one who solved the Project Nova issue yesterday, and after careful consideration, I've decided to bring him on as a senior software engineer." The room went silent instantly. Curtis was the first to break it, his voice as hard as stone. "With all due respect, we don't even know his background. What degrees? Where did he work?" Brooke turned toward Curtis. Her gaze was cold enough to slice metal. "Mr. Marlowe has over 15 years of experience. He was a lead engineer at an AI startup in San Francisco. He holds a master's in computer science from the University of Washington. And, more importantly, he solved in 10 minutes what our team struggled with for 3 straight days. Curtis, do you have any other questions?" Curtis clenched his jaw but said nothing. "Grant will be working directly on Project Nova," Brooke continued. "He'll have his own office and full system access. I expect everyone to treat him as a true senior engineer." She scanned the room. "Anyone object?" Silence. "Good. Meeting dismissed. Grant, follow me." Brooke led Grant to a corner office, spacious, bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle and the shimmering waters of Puget Sound. A modern desk, a premium ergonomic chair, and 3 brand-new monitors sat waiting for him. "This is your office," Brooke said. It will finish the setup within an hour. If you need anything, just let me know. Grant stood in the middle of the room, feeling as though he had stepped inside a dream he wasn't sure he was allowed to believe. "Brooke," he said softly, his voice tightening, "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," she replied with a smile warmer than the sunlight outside. "Just work. That's enough." She stepped out, then paused at the doorway. "Oh, Grant? Don't let Curtis bother you. He's just jealous. He thinks he deserves a promotion, but his skills aren't quite there yet." Brooke winked playfully before leaving. Grant sat down, his hand brushing across the smooth surface of the desk. It had been 5 years since he last sat in an office like this, 5 years since he last felt like he mattered. But deep inside his chest, an old fear resurfaced. The fear that if he allowed himself to be happy again, the world would once more rip everything away from him. Outside the building, in the parking lot across the street, a woman sat in an old sedan parked close to the fence, holding binoculars aimed at Northbridge Labs. Deanna Collins, Heather's younger sister. She had been watching Grant for 6 months, ever since she accidentally discovered he was working as a night shift janitor. At first, she just wanted to know he was still alive. Nothing more. But today, when she saw Grant step out of a luxury Tesla, wearing an expensive suit, walking beside a woman who looked like she belonged to the upper class, a cold shiver ran down Deanna's spine. Grant, the man who vanished completely after the accident. The man who abandoned the Collins family. Never attended the memorial. Never called. Not a single word. And now he had a new life? A new opportunity? A new woman? Deanna's fingers curled into a fist until her knuckles whitened. "No," she whispered through clenched teeth. "He doesn't deserve happiness. Not after what he did." She pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Kyle, I need you to do something for me." Her voice dropped like steel hitting stone. "There's someone I want you to follow." Grant's first week at work passed like a whirlwind. Every morning he woke up at 6, put on a polished suit, and walked into the office like any other engineer. Each day he sat before 3 monitors, immersing himself in the one thing that had ever made him feel alive: code. But not everything was easy. The younger engineers looked at him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. They whispered among themselves, how could someone who used to be a janitor suddenly become a senior engineer? Grant's code was scrutinized more intensely than usual. Every technical decision he made was questioned to the last detail. And Curtis Bell was a problem in every sense. One Thursday afternoon, Grant was focused on his screen when the office door swung open. Curtis walked in without bothering to knock. "I need to talk to you," Curtis said, his voice cold as ice. Grant looked up from the monitor. "About what?" "About you suddenly showing up here and taking the spot of people who've worked hard for years." Grant turned his chair to face him fully. "I didn't take anyone's spot. Brooke invited me." "Yes, Brooke," Curtis smirked. "Do you know her husband is dead? She's lonely, vulnerable, and you're taking advantage of that." Heat rushed through Grant's veins, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm not taking advantage of anyone. I'm just doing my job." "Oh, sorry," Curtis said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I forgot. Your job is to make her feel like a good person by rescuing some pitiful stray. You're just her charity project. She doesn't actually need you." Grant stood up. He was slightly taller than Curtis, his shadow falling over him. "I think you should leave my office. Right now." Curtis let out a dry laugh. "Just wait. Sooner or later, she'll realize you're a fraud. And when that happens, you'll go right back to your mop." He turned and slammed the door behind him. Grant sat back down, his hands still trembling. A small part of him, the weakest, most wounded part, whispered that maybe Curtis was right. Maybe he was just a charity project picked up from the bottom of society. His phone buzzed. A message from Brooke. "Are you free tonight? Brady wants to meet you. I told him about you, and now he really wants to see the best engineer in the world. Come have dinner at my place, 7 p.m. B." Grant stared at the screen. Brady, Brooke's son. It had been 5 years since Grant had been near a child. 5 years without hearing a child's laughter in the same room. Fear rose in him, but so did something else. Longing. He typed back, "I'll be there. Thank you for inviting me." At exactly 7 p.m., Grant stood at the gate of Brooke's home in Medina, a quiet, affluent neighborhood overlooking Lake Washington. He had driven there in his old Honda Civic, feeling every bit like someone who didn't belong in this world. The house was large and modern, with massive glass windows framing a sweeping view of the lake. The garden was perfectly trimmed, with a pool and even a private dock. It was the kind of place magazines called luxury living. Grant rang the doorbell. The door opened, and Brooke stood there in a simple sweater and jeans, looking younger and far softer than the sharp, composed CEO he knew from the office. She smiled warmly. "You made it. Come in." Grant stepped inside. The interior was even more stunning. High ceilings, soft golden lighting, modern furniture, and art pieces lining the walls. But what made him pause wasn't the elegance. It was the sound, the clear laughter of a child. "Mom, is he here yet?" A little boy ran from the living room. Brady, 6 years old, blonde hair and blue eyes, a tiny mirror of Brooke. He wore robot-printed pajamas and held a tablet tightly in his hand. He froze when he saw Grant, eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you really the best engineer in the world?" Grant let out a laugh, a sound that felt strangely unfamiliar coming from his own chest. "I'm not sure about that, but I always try my best. Mom said you fixed the code nobody else could." "Brady," Brooke laughed, "stop overwhelming our guest. Go wash your hands. Dinner's ready." "Okay." Brady turned to run off, then spun back, eyes shining. "Can you teach me to code? I want to make a game." "Brady." Brooke's tone held the familiar warning of a mother. "I'd love to," Grant replied, gently but firmly. And what surprised him was, he meant every word. Brady squealed with excitement and bolted down the hallway. Brooke turned back to Grant. "You don't have to." "I want to," Grant said, soft but certain. "Really, it's been a long time since I've been around children." They stood in a quiet moment. Then Brooke nodded, her expression softening. "Then, let's have dinner." Dinner was simple but warm. Roasted chicken, grilled vegetables, and fresh salad. Brady sat between his mother and Grant, chattering endlessly about school, friends, games, and tiny things that, in a 6-year-old's world, were everything. Grant listened attentively, answered every question, and laughed at the boy's earnest, brilliant little observations. For the first time in 5 years, he felt peaceful. There was something about sitting around a dining table, hearing utensils clink, hearing laughter weave into casual conversation, that reminded him of his old family. But strangely, tonight the memory didn't tear him apart the way it always had. It slipped into his chest as something warm, tender, bittersweet. "Mr. Grant," Brady said suddenly, looking up with wide eyes, "do you have kids?" The table fell quiet. Brooke glanced at Grant. Worried. Grant set down his fork, taking a long breath. "I used to," he said softly. "2 boys, Evan and Liam. They were 6, just like you." "Where are they?" Brady asked, still innocent, unaware he had touched a wound carved to the bone. "Brady," Brooke murmured, "that question is—" "It's okay," Grant interrupted gently, shaking his head to reassure her. He looked straight into Brady's eyes. "They're in heaven now. They died in an accident." Brady was silent for a moment, then said quietly, with surprising sincerity, "I'm really sorry. You must miss them a lot." "Every day," Grant whispered, voice cracking. Brady thought for another moment, then reached his small hand across the table and placed it over Grant's. "But you can be friends with my mom and me. We can help you be less sad." Tears blurred Grant's vision, but he smiled through them. "Thank you, Brady. That means a lot to me." Brooke had to turn away, wiping her eyes quietly. Gratitude swelled in her chest, gratitude that her son's heart remained so pure, so kind. After dinner, Brady dragged Grant upstairs to show him his Minecraft world. Grant sat on the floor while the boy proudly narrated every detail like he was presenting $1 million project. And for the first time in years, Grant didn't feel like a broken man. He felt normal. It was late. Brady had fallen asleep on the couch, tablet still glowing faintly in his arms. Brooke gently lifted him, carrying him upstairs. Grant stood by the doorway, watching her tuck the boy in and kiss his forehead. It was a small, quiet moment, but overflowing with love. Something tightened in Grant's chest, a deep old longing he thought had been buried for good, the longing for a family. Brooke stepped out and closed the door softly behind her. "You okay?" she asked. Grant nodded. "Brady is a wonderful kid." "He likes you," Brooke smiled. "He hasn't stopped talking about the engineer all week." They walked downstairs together and stepped out onto the balcony overlooking Lake Washington. Moonlight rippled across the water, and the cool night air carried the scent of the lake and the soft sound of waves tapping the shore. "Brooke," Grant said after a long, quiet moment, "I want to thank you." "For what?" She turned to him. "For giving me this opportunity. For believing in me. For seeing something in me that I thought I'd lost." Brooke looked at him, her expression softening. "Do you know what I see in you?" Grant shook his head faintly. "I see a man who has walked through hell and still hasn't lost his kindness," she said slowly. "A man who still cares enough to help a stranger, even when he has nothing left. That's rare." She paused. "And it reminds me that no matter how cruel life can be, we always get to choose how we treat others." Grant met her eyes. "So do you," he replied. "You lost your loved ones, but you built a company, raised an amazing child, and still find time to help someone else." Brooke gave a small, wistful smile. "Maybe we're helping each other." Their eyes held. In that moment, there was understanding, connection, an invisible thread pulling two fractured souls a little closer. Not love, not yet, but something real. Before any of it could become words, Brooke's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Her expression changed instantly. "What's wrong?" Grant asked. Brooke looked up, tension sharp in her eyes. "Someone just tried to breach the company's system." Brooke's hand trembled slightly as she stared at the security notification on her phone screen. Grant stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "Security alert. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Multiple login failures on the admin account. Source: unknown. Time: 22:47 PST." "This isn't the first time," Brooke said, her voice stretched tight like a wire. "In the last 3 days, we've detected 5 similar intrusion attempts." Grant frowned. "5 times? Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought it was just some random script kiddies," she exhaled. "But now—" She paused, her eyes still glued to the screen. "Now they're targeting my account directly." "I need to see the logs," Grant said, his voice shifting instantly into work mode. Brooke nodded, went back inside to grab her laptop, then brought it out to the table on the balcony. Grant sat down, opened the console, and his eyes skimmed through lines of data at dizzying speed. "This isn't an amateur hacker," he concluded after a few minutes. "They're using a pretty sophisticated botnet to mask their real IP. And look at this. They're probing multiple endpoints, testing each weak spot one by one." "But why?" Brooke frowned. We haven't even launched the product yet. There's nothing worth stealing." "Maybe theft isn't the goal," Grant said slowly. "Maybe it's sabotage." Brooke sat down beside him, her hands clasped tightly together. "You think this is corporate espionage?" "It's possible. Or—" Grant hesitated. "Or what?" "Or someone has a personal grudge against you. Or against the company. Or against me." The next morning, Grant arrived at the office very early, 6:30 a.m., before even the receptionist. He wanted to check the system logs while everything was still quiet, with no one around to interrupt him. But as soon as he opened the door to his office, he froze. Someone had been there. The stacks of documents on his desk had been shifted. One of the 3 monitors was still faintly warm, as if someone had been sitting there not long ago. A strange, cold feeling crawled down his spine. Grant immediately logged into the internal camera system. The footage showed someone entering his office at 5:30 a.m., far too early to be just passing by. The person wore a hood pulled low, deliberately turning their face away from the camera. Every movement was careful, calculated. Grant clenched his fist. Clearly, someone wasn't just trying to breach the system. They were specifically interested in him. Someone wanted to know what he was doing, what he was touching. By 9 a.m., Brooke had called an emergency meeting with the security team and the senior engineers. Grant sat in a corner of the table, quietly observing. Curtis Bell was there, too, looking even more disgruntled than usual. "We have a serious problem," Brooke began, her voice like a blade. "Someone is trying to break into our system, and it's not coming from the outside. It's from inside." Murmurs erupted around the table. "An inside job?" one engineer asked with a deep frown. "Possibly," Brooke nodded. "Grant has found that the recent attempts all used valid credentials, which means they belong to someone with authorized access." "Or," Curtis cut in, his tone razor-sharp, "or those credentials were stolen. Maybe by someone who just joined the company and hasn't been fully vetted." The atmosphere in the room immediately grew heavy. Grant looked straight at Curtis, his voice still calm. "What exactly are you implying, Curtis?" "I'm just saying it's hard to believe," Curtis shrugged, "that a janitor suddenly becomes a senior engineer, and right after that, we have a security breach." "That's enough." Brooke's voice suddenly hardened. "Curtis, you're accusing a colleague without any evidence. That is unacceptable." "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking," Curtis shot back, refusing to back down. "No," another voice rang out. Amy Chen, the young engineer who had been working closely with Grant all week, looked up. "You're saying what you're thinking. Grant helped us fix a problem you couldn't solve for 3 days, Curtis. Maybe he isn't the problem." Curtis's face flushed red. "Mrs. Hastings," he turned to Brooke, his voice tight. "I request a full review of all of Grant's activity logs since the day he joined the company." Brooke looked over at Grant. He nodded immediately, without the slightest hesitation. "I have nothing to hide. Go ahead." IT took nearly 3 hours to audit all of Grant's activity. The conclusion: clean. Nothing suspicious. During that time, Grant ran his own investigation. He traced all the unauthorized access attempts, cross-referenced timestamps, behavior, IP addresses, and discovered a very clear pattern. Every single attempt occurred during lunch hour, the time when most people were away from their desks, and all of them originated from a single internal IP address, an IP assigned to Curtis Bell's office. Grant printed the full report and brought it to Brooke. She read it, her eyes widening. "Curtis? But why?" "I'm not sure," Grant said plainly. "But we have a way to find out." They decided to set a trap. Grant created a decoy file with an irresistibly tempting name: Nova, Final Source, Code, Chaka Backup. He placed it in a folder that looked heavily protected, but in reality, the permissions were set so that any admin could accidentally access it. Then they waited. It didn't take long. At 12:15 p.m., right in the middle of lunch break, The system logs recorded someone accessing that folder from Curtis's office. But when security rushed there, the office was empty. Curtis wasn't inside. "He knows we're watching," Grant said, his eyes glued to the log entries. Brooke nodded, her voice firm. "Find him, now." They swept the building and found Curtis in the underground parking garage just as he was about to get into his car. In his hand was a USB drive. "Curtis!" Brooke shouted. "Stop!" Curtis turned, his face draining of color. For a split second, it looked like he might run, but two security guards were already blocking the exit. He was escorted back into the building. In the conference room, Curtis sat across from Brooke, Grant, and the head of security. The USB lay on the table between them, small but heavy as a verdict. "Explain," Brooke said, her voice freezing cold. Curtis remained silent for quite a while, his fingers tightly interlaced, before he finally spoke. "I've worked here 8 years. For 8 years, I've given my life to this company. I work 70 hours a week. I've missed my daughter's birthdays, my wedding anniversary, all for this company." He looked up, eyes reddening. "Then he shows up," Curtis pointed straight at Grant. "A janitor. And in one day, you give him everything I've been hoping for over 8 years. A corner office, a senior position, full access. You even invite him to your home." His voice began to crack. "You've never invited me? You've never asked if I was okay? To you, I'm just a typing machine that never gets tired." Brooke sighed, but her gaze stayed sharp. "So what is this? Jealousy? Revenge?" "I just wanted you to see that he's not who you think he is," Curtis argued. "I wanted to prove you were wrong to trust him." "By sabotaging the system?" Grant asked, his voice dropping low. "By putting the entire company's data at risk?" Curtis lowered his head, his shoulders sagging. "I didn't mean to hurt the company. I just wanted to be seen." Brooke stood up. "Curtis, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building, and we will consider legal action against you for violating your NDA." Curtis rose, looking like he'd aged 10 years in a few minutes. "You'll regret this," he rasped. "He'll hurt you too. Everyone does." 2 security guards led him out. The door closed behind them, leaving a dense silence in the room. The moment the door clicked shut, Brooke sank into her chair, as if all the strength had drained from her body. "I didn't think Curtis could do something like that," she whispered. Grant sat down beside her. "You can't blame yourself for his choices." "But he was right about one thing," Brooke said, staring down at the table, her voice unsteady. "I didn't see him. I was so focused on keeping the company alive that I forgot about the people working inside it." "You can't save everyone," Grant said softly. "No one can." "But I can try," she replied quietly, half defeated, half stubborn. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Grant spoke. "You saved me." Brooke turned to look at him. "No, Grant, you saved yourself," she said, shaking her head. "I just opened the door." Their eyes met again. There it was once more, that feeling. Something quietly growing between them, unnamed but unmistakable. Right then, Brooke's phone buzzed. A new email. She opened it, read it, and her face suddenly went pale. "What is it?" Grant asked. Brooke turned the screen toward him. An anonymous email. No sender name. Just one line of text and an attachment. "Do you really know the man you're trusting?" Grant opened the file. It was a photo. He recognized it instantly. Him, 5 years ago, slumped in a bar, a bottle of liquor in front of him, eyes glassy, beard unkempt. The worst version of himself, drowning in alcohol and despair. Behind him, standing in the shadows, almost hidden, was the face of a woman. Deanna Collins. "Who is she?" Brooke asked quietly. Grant closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, his voice dropping low. "My sister-in-law. Heather's younger sister. And she's watching you." Brooke said slowly. Grant nodded, his gaze heavy. For a very long time now. Brooke stared at the photo on the screen. A slow unease spread through her chest. Grant, she said carefully, you need to tell me about Deanna. Grant stood up, walked over to the window, and looked down at downtown Seattle, draped in a cold gray light. For a long moment, he said nothing. Deanna is Heather's younger sister, he began, his voice low and hoarse. 3 years younger. The two of them were very close. After Heather died, Deanna, she put all the blame on me. Why? Brooke asked softly. Because that day, I was the one driving, Grant replied, his shoulders tightening slightly. Deanna said I should have reacted faster, that I could have swerved, that it was my fault her sister died. Brooke stood up and stepped closer to him. But it wasn't your fault, Grant. It was an accident. I know, he whispered. But a part of me believes her. Deanna just says out loud what I quietly accuse myself of every single day. How long has she been watching you? Brooke asked. Grant turned back to her. I don't know exactly, but probably since I started working here as a janitor. She wants to make sure I don't get to be happy. That's ridiculous, Brooke murmured, shaking her head. She's hurting, Grant said softly. We all hurt in our own twisted way. Brooke's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same anonymous sender. Meet me at Pike Place Market, 6 p.m. today. Come alone. If you don't, I'll send everything I have on Grant to the press. Brooke handed the phone to Grant. He read it, then shook his head. You can't go. This could clearly be a trap. Or a chance to end this, Brooke replied. I need to know what she really wants. Then I'll go with you, Grant said immediately. No, Brooke said firmly. She wants to see me alone. If you show up, it could make everything worse. Grant felt helpless, but he knew she was right. At least, let me stay close by, in case you need me. Brooke nodded. Okay. At 6 p.m., Pike Place Market was packed. The smell of fresh fish, flowers, and coffee blended in the air. Vendors shouted, street music played, and crowds squeezed through the narrow walkways. Brooke stood near the famous fish-throwing area, scanning the surroundings. Grant stood about 50 meters away, blending into the crowd, his eyes never leaving her. A woman stepped out from the shadow beside a red brick building. Deanna Collins. She wore a black coat, her hair tied back in a ponytail, sunglasses on despite the fading light. Deanna walked up and stopped a few steps away from Brooke. Mrs. Hastings, Deanna said. Thank you for coming. What do you want? Brooke asked directly, wasting no time. I want you to know the truth about Grant Marlowe. I already know the truth, Brooke replied. He told me. Deanna let out a dry, humorless laugh. He told you he lost his family? That he's broken? Yes, that's true. But did he tell you that after the funeral, he disappeared without a word? That he didn't show up at the one-year memorial for the boys? That he let our family search for him for months, thinking he might be dead too? Brooke stayed silent, listening. My sister loved him, Deanna went on, her voice beginning to tremble. Heather loved him more than anything. And the boys, Evan and Liam, thought he was a superhero. But him? He vanished. He abandoned even the memory of them. He was in pain, Brooke said. We were in pain too, Deanna burst out, her voice rising, drawing a few glances from people nearby. She lowered her tone again, teeth clenched. But we stayed. We faced it. And him? He ran. And now, 5 years later, he's suddenly fine? He has a new job, a new life, a new woman to take care of him? Deanna stepped closer, her eyes blazing. You think you're saving him, but you don't know him at all. He doesn't know how to stay. When things get hard, he'll run again. And you, along with your son, will be the ones left hurt. Brooke met Deanna's gaze head-on, not flinching. "He told me all of that," she said calmly. "I know he disappeared. I know he made choices he regrets to this day. But do you know what else I understand?" Deanna said nothing. "I know what it feels like to lose the people you love," Brooke continued, her voice softening. "I lost my father and my husband on the same day. A plane crash, 5 years ago. I had just given birth to Brady 3 months earlier. They were on their way to visit us, and the plane went down right after takeoff." Deanna looked at her, her expression wavering. "I wanted to disappear too," Brooke went on. "I wanted to give up. But I had Brady, a tiny baby who needed me to stay, so I wasn't allowed to fall apart. I had to keep living, even though inside I was shattered." She tilted her head slightly. "Grant had no one. He lost everyone he loved. So tell me, Deanna, if you had no one left to hold on to, what would you have done? Are you sure you would have been stronger than he was?" Deanna's eyes filled with tears. "He abandoned them," she whispered. "No," Brooke replied firmly. "He survived the only way he knew how, by disappearing. Now he's trying to find his way back. You can help him, or you can keep punishing him. But punishing him won't bring your sister back. It won't change anything." Deanna stood there, trembling slightly with emotion. Then she pulled an envelope from her coat pocket and handed it to Brooke. "This is everything I have. Photos, documents, everything about Grant's past. I was going to use it to destroy him, but—" She swallowed. "Now I'm not so sure anymore." Brooke took the envelope but didn't open it. "You still love your sister," she said gently, "and you need someone to pay. But Grant isn't your enemy. The tragedy is. That's what took everything from you." Deanna wiped her tears quickly. "How am I supposed to forgive him?" "Start by forgiving yourself first," Brooke said quietly, "for not being able to save your sister, for still being alive when she's not. That's the burden you're really carrying, isn't it?" At that, Deanna almost crumpled, tears spilling down her face. From a distance, Grant watched the scene, feeling his heart clench. He couldn't take it anymore. He stepped out of the crowd and walked toward the two women. "Deanna," he called, his voice low but clear. She turned. When their eyes met, everything between them, the grief, the resentment, the memories, seemed to surge up all at once. "I'm sorry," Grant said, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry I disappeared. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you and your family. I'm sorry I was too weak." He stopped, tears beginning to spill. "But I never abandoned them. Not for a single day have I stopped thinking about Heather, about Evan and Liam. Not one day have I not wished I had died instead of them." Deanna stared at him, her eyes swimming. "I want to hate you. I have to hate you, or I can't keep going." "I know," Grant nodded. "If you need someone to blame, blame me. But don't let it destroy your whole life. Heather wouldn't want that." Deanna stood still for a long time, her body trembling. Then slowly, she nodded. "I need time," she said very softly. "I understand," Grant replied. Deanna turned and walked back into the crowd, her figure gradually disappearing into the market. Brooke stepped up beside Grant and laid a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did really well," she said. Grant wiped his tears, his face drained with exhaustion. "I'm not sure. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am a coward." "No," Brooke answered instantly, firmly. "A coward wouldn't stand here today, wouldn't face her, wouldn't open his mouth and apologize." She looked deep into his eyes. "You faced the worst ghost you have, Grant. That's not cowardice. That's courage." Grant looked back at her, and for the first time, somewhere inside his heavy chest, he began to believe that maybe she was right. The following weeks passed in a strange kind of peace. Curtis was gone from the company. Deanna no longer appeared anywhere, or at least Grant no longer felt the heavy, burning gaze of her on his back. Project Nova ran smoothly, progressing better than anyone had predicted. But the thing that changed most was not the work. It was the relationship between Grant and Brooke. They began having lunch together. Not tense, corporate-style lunches, but simple midday breaks in small cafes around the office district. They sat at a window table with 2 cups of coffee, sometimes a shared sandwich, and talked about everything. Technology, their pasts, the dreams they once had that eventually shattered. Brooke told Grant about what it felt like to run a company while raising a child alone, about the nights she sat in her dark living room, crying quietly after Brady was asleep, believing she was failing at both roles, CEO and mother. Grant told her about the nightmares that never ceased, dreams where he heard his sons laughing, chased after them endlessly, but could never reach them, about the guilt that tightened around his ribs every time he realized he was starting to feel happy again. "Every time I laugh," Grant admitted one day, "I feel like I'm betraying them." They were sitting on a wooden bench at Discovery Park, looking out over the muted blue of Puget Sound. The late afternoon sun softened, and the breeze from the water stirred Brooke's hair. "Betraying them how?" Brooke tilted her head. "By allowing myself to keep living," Grant said. "By laughing. By feeling something again." Brooke was quiet for a while, watching the ripples on the water. Then she spoke. "I said the exact same thing to my therapist once," she confessed. "After losing my husband, every time I felt a moment of joy, I felt like I was denying his memory. Like if I smiled, it meant he never mattered." She turned to him. "My therapist told me this. The people we've lost don't want us to die with them. They want us to live, even for their part too." Grant stared out at the water, his eyes reddening. "You think Heather would want me to be happy?" "I think," Brooke said softly, "she'd want you to keep loving, keep living, and keep being the incredible father you once were." "But Evan and Liam aren't here anymore," Grant whispered. "No," Brooke nodded gently, "but Brady is, and he loves you." Grant snapped his head toward her, startled. He said that to you?" "He told me," Brooke said with a warm, shimmering smile. "Mom, Mr. Grant is just like Dad. He's smart and kind. I wish he could be my real dad." Tears immediately filled Grant's eyes. "I can't replace his father," he murmured, shaking his head. "No one's asking you to," Brooke replied, "but you can become someone important in his life. Someone he admires, learns from, someone he can tell his friends at school about." She hesitated for a beat, then looked straight into his eyes. "And someone I am starting to feel very strongly about." The air between them thickened. Grant felt his heartbeat stumble, then race. "Brooke," he began awkwardly, "I don't know if I'm ready for—" "I'm not asking you to be ready," she gently interrupted. "I'm only telling you what I feel. And if one day you feel the same, I'll be here." They fell quiet. Brooke's hand slowly shifted, moving toward his on the bench. Grant looked down, but he didn't pull away. For the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to hold a woman's hand, and didn't immediately feel the world dragging him back into grief. That evening, Grant was invited to Brooke's home again. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Not the awkward dinner of a guest, but something that felt almost like coming back to a familiar place. The moment he stepped inside, Brady grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the playroom. "Mr. Grant, come here. I have something to show you." On the opposite wall was a large drawing, carefully taped up, a child's messy lines but full of effort. 3 figures stood together, Brady, Brooke, and Grant, hand in hand under a starry night sky, with little yellow dots above them representing city lights. "I made this for you," Brady said proudly. "This is our new family." Grant crouched down to the boy's eye level, staring at the drawing, then at Brady. "Brady, are you sure?" he asked softly. You've only known me a short while. I know, Brady nodded, as if it was obvious. But I like you. My mom likes you. You make my mom laugh. My dad used to make her laugh like that too. He paused, voice becoming small but firm. I think my dad would like you. Grant couldn't hold back the tears. He wrapped his arms around Brady, holding him tightly, as if afraid the boy might disappear if he loosened his grip. Thank you, he whispered. You don't know how much that means to me. At the doorway, Brooke watched them, her own eyes glistening. She stepped forward, knelt beside them, and wrapped her arms around both of them. In that warmly lit room, the three people who had each been shattered by tragedy, a mother, a man who had lost his entire world, and a child who still believed in magic, held on to each other like a family pieced together from broken fragments. And though the future was uncertain, in that moment, they truly belonged to one another. 3 months passed in a strange, almost peaceful rhythm. Project Nova launched with resounding success. Investors were pleased, the press reported non-stop, and Northbridge Labs suddenly became the new tech hotspot of the West Coast. And Grant? He was no longer the lonely janitor in a dim, cramped apartment. He still kept the old place, a trace of the life he once lived. But most evenings he stayed at Brooke's home, helping Brady with math homework, having dinner with the two of them, or simply sitting on the balcony watching Seattle's lights shimmer across the water while listening to Brooke talk about her long day. They hadn't officially called it dating, but everyone in the company knew. He was in love with Brooke, and that terrified him. One Friday night, Grant stood alone in his office, looking down at downtown Seattle. The city glittered like a map of stars. In his hand was a small box, the simple ring he had bought 2 days earlier. He planned to propose to Brooke. But did he deserve to? Heather, Grant whispered into the emptiness. If you can hear me, please tell me if I'm doing the right thing. Tell me if I'm allowed to be happy again. Only silence answered him. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Grant, it's Deanna. I need to meet you. Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you. I have something to tell you about Heather. Meet me at Memorial Park, 8 p.m. tonight. Grant stared at the screen. The tone was different. No anger, no threat, just a heavy sincerity. He decided to go. Memorial Park was unusually quiet at 8 p.m. Street lamps cast a soft golden light over the gravel paths. The small memorial garden on the east side, where families planted trees and placed plaques for the loved ones they had lost, sat in a gentle hush. Grant found Deanna sitting silently on a wooden bench beside a young tree with thin, delicate shade. At its base was a plaque engraved with, "In memory of Heather, Evan, and Liam Marlowe. Forever in our hearts." Grant froze. He didn't know Deanna had planted this. I planted it 2 years ago, Deanna said softly when she heard his footsteps. I needed a place to talk to them. Grant sat beside her without a word. I've been thinking a lot since we last met at Pike Place, Deanna continued, about forgiveness, about what Brooke said, about myself. She turned to him, her eyes tired, and I realized I wasn't truly angry at you. I was angry at fate, in the universe, angry that Heather was gone and I was still here. You were just the easiest person to blame. Tears slid down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Grant. I'm sorry for making your grief heavier. I'm sorry for watching you, threatening you, and placing burdens on you that you never deserved. Grant inhaled deeply, his own eyes reddening. I understand, Deanna. I really do. Deanna gently touched his shoulder. She wanted you to be happy. And I think Brooke is someone who can give that to you. Grant looked at her, stunned to the point of speechlessness. You really think that? Deanna nodded. I've seen the way she looks at you, the way she protects you, the way she loves her son, and loves your pain too. My sister used to say, Grant is a man born to love and to be loved. I think it's time you believe that. She stood up, smiling in a way Grant hadn't seen from her in 5 years. Go. Go to her. Grant rose with her, taking one last look at the memorial tree. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves like a quiet greeting. Thank you, Heather, he whispered. Thank you for giving me permission to live again. He turned to Deanna. Thank you for everything. Deanna smiled softly. Go, Grant, and be happy. That's what my sister wanted most. Grant drove straight to Brooke's house. It was already dark, but the warm lights inside were still glowing softly. Brady was likely asleep, but Brooke was still awake. When he knocked, she opened the door in soft pajamas, her hair loose, her eyes still carrying a trace of surprise. Grant? I thought you'd gone home. I love you, Grant said bluntly, without a second of hesitation. Brooke froze, as if unsure she'd heard him correctly. I know, Grant continued. I should have said this in a more romantic way. Should have waited for the perfect moment. But I can't wait anymore. He stepped inside and gently closed the door behind him. I spent 5 years just existing. 5 years running instead of facing the pain. But you showed me that life can still be beautiful, that I can still love, still live, that I deserve happiness. Grant knelt down. He took a small box from his jacket pocket. Brooke Hastings, he said, voice trembling but steady. You saved me in every way a human being can be saved. You didn't just give me a job, you gave me a reason to live. You and Brady, the two of you are my family. He opened the box. The ring sparkled under the warm light. Will you marry me? Brooke covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Are you sure? Grant, I don't want you to feel pressured because… I've never been more sure, Grant cut in. I love you. I love Brady. I want to build a life with the two of you. Brooke knelt down too, cupping his face in both hands. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. 1,000 times, yes. Grant slipped the ring onto her finger. They held each other tightly. Two shattered souls that had finally found healing. A month later, they held a small wedding in a charming church in Queen Anne. No extravagance, no showiness, just family and the people they truly loved. Brady was the ring bearer, wearing a tiny suit, his face glowing as he proudly held the ring box. Deanna was there too, sitting in the front row, smiling through tears. When Grant and Brooke exchanged vows, it seemed no one in the church could hold back their emotions. I promise to love you every day, Grant said. I promise to be the father Brady deserves, and I promise never to forget that life is a gift you helped me see again. Brooke replied with her own vows. I promise to stand beside you through good days and hard ones. I promise to remind you that you deserve every good thing. And I promise to love you not only for who you are now, but for who you've become after everything you've survived. When they kissed, the entire church erupted in applause. 6 months later, Brooke announced she was pregnant, with twins. Grant could hardly believe his ears. Twins? He repeated, eyes widening like a child seeing fireworks for the first time. Brooke nodded, glowing with joy. 2 boys. Grant collapsed onto a chair, overwhelmed by the surge of happiness. Then he cried. But this time, they were the purest tears of joy. Heather knew, he whispered. She always knew. When the boys were born, they named them Evan and Liam, not to replace the children Grant had lost, but to honor them, to let their memory live on, in light, not in darkness. And that was the journey Grant and Brooke had traveled. From 2 souls once shattered, they found each other, healed each other, and rebuilt a life from losses that once seemed impossible to rise from. Love doesn't erase the past, but it can give us the courage to move forward, to open our hearts, to believe we deserve happiness one more time. Thank you for following this story to the very end. If you'd like to join me for many more emotional journeys, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any future stories. See you in the next video. Wishing you a peaceful, gentle day.